This is part 3 of our blueberry grow along, and today we're looking at starting to harvest the blueberries. Now this will depend on where you live and the varieties that you have, whether or not your blueberries are going to be ready. Mine are just starting to blush and starting to ripen, but it is only the first few that are doing so. The bush that I have in one of the pots has actually ripened a little bit quicker, but the birds have sadly got to them quicker than I have managed to net them. Blueberries are best picked fully ripe if you can, so getting a net over them to avoid any bird damage or any other animals stealing them is always a good idea. They also can stay on the plant ripe for a little bit longer than some of the other fruit without spoiling, so it's not something that you need to get to, and make sure that you harvest as soon as each of the berries are ready as well. So when blueberries are ready to harvest, it's really easy to tell. First of all, their colour is going to change and it's going to be a uniform colour of blue. So if they are still red, like these ones down here, then they're not ripe yet. It is best to ripen them if you can on the bush, because that's going to help with the flavour. And then next thing to check is whether or not when you just gently twist it, whether it just pulls off and falls off in your hand straight away. If it does, then they're ready to harvest. You can see this one, the pink lemonade, is starting to blush, but it still has quite a way to go, and they go really quite pink. So if you have a variety like that, then keep an eye on them, because it can happen quite suddenly. See one down there that's starting to go as well. Have a check under the bush as well and make sure that you're not missing any that are a little bit lower down. This is the variety that we potted up together in the blue pot called Patriot, and it did have lots of berries on that I was about to show you as they came ripe, but the birds have stolen them before I've got there. So it's got a much larger size of blueberry, very much like what we find in the supermarket. So if you're after that for your kids or for yourself, then a Patriot is a great one to go for, and it actually ripened a lot quicker than my other bushes as well. Of course, not all varieties are going to be ready at the same time, so this one is a variety called Rubble that is just starting to put on its colour now, but it's still got quite a way to go, so just keep an eye on those ones, and you should have some later fruit as well. You will find that pigeons and blackbirds and things like that are eating the berries when they become ripe as well, so having a cover on them at this stage is really helpful. This is a finer mesh than I normally use, and then on the big cage I'll show you what we're going to put on there. Another thing that we also need to do is feed our blueberries again. So this slow release fertilizer lasts usually around sort of a 3-month period, so I'll be feeding again with this. If you are using a liquid feed, then it's likely that you need to do that once a month, so do check your packaging and see what it is that you have. If, however, you have blueberries that are growing in the ground rather than in pots, and they've had a good mulch of ericaceous compost in the winter, then you don't need to feed them usually at all. If, however, they are maybe not doing as well as you're hoping, then a slow release fertilizer might well be a good addition to just help them continue to ripen up. You can see I've got a weed in here as well, so I'm just going to pull that one out, which is nice and easy because it's very loose soil, so that's not a problem. And then I've got another blueberry that's fallen off before it's ripe. I'm just loosening up the soil just a little bit, and then taking the fertilizer and just spreading it around. We do want to avoid it being on any leaves or too near the stem. A little bit more. And then I'm just going to agitate that into the soil as well. With these pots, you can see that quite a lot of the soil is actually really compressed down now, and it doesn't look like we've filled it much at all. So one thing I will be doing is actually repotting these in the same pots, but adding compost below and above, just to make sure that these are going to do well in pots going forward, but we'll do that later in the year. There's plenty of time before we do that. So we're going to get this one covered back up. Very gently try not to knock off any more of those berries. Don't forget, whenever you're netting any of your fruit, that you want to be making sure that the net can't have any birds or anything get in. When it comes to storing the blueberries, this is very much the same as the strawberries if you've been following that grow along. So you're going to want to grab yourself a glass jar, and then we're just going to put a little piece of kitchen roll in it and keep the berries in here. You can add these to the fridge or keep them on the side if you don't want them cold, and they should keep in here for probably a week or so. And so you might notice that some of these are green, and that's just that they've come off the bush when I've taken the net off, rather than I've tried to harvest them like that. And then another thing that we can do with blueberries is give them a good wash, a good dry, and put them straight into the freezer to be used at any point in the year as well. The next time we'll be looking at these blueberries is when we're looking at feeding them and also trimming them, but we don't trim bushes that are too young. So depending on whether or not you've bought your bush this year and how large it is, that might be something that you don't need to do yet. So keep an eye out for that a little bit later on in the year.